CliffCentral.com.
Well, listen, there's this guy called Scott Picken. I'm going to tell you very briefly what he's all about because we only met the other day for the first time. He's one of South Africa's leading global investors. He's written a number of books. He's a well-known author when it comes to international real estate investment. Mubs, if you had to buy property overseas, this is the guy to talk to.
Oh, okay.
That's what Scott does. He's the CEO and founder of Wealth Migrate, the premier global real estate investment marketplace. He loves IT. He's had 17 years of international real estate investment experience. And look at this. He's sitting right opposite you, my buddy. He's coming to South Africa to give a couple of talks. He's doing a big conference, and you can come and learn about what it is and what it isn't you should invest in. Couldn't wish for better authority than Scott Picken. He's sitting right here. Hey, Scott, how are you doing, man? Let me get your microphone on. There we are. Hi.
Yeah. Good morning, Gareth. Morning to all your listeners.
How are you,
awesome
dude?
to share. No, very good, man.
Nice to see you. Where did you just come from? Which part of the world did you just come from?
No, I flew in from Knysna.
Oh, well,
so,
it's not very international, but okay.
No, so yeah, literally we got back recently from overseas, but been home for a week, so it's been awesome.
Now, a lot of people in South Africa, and all over the world, you have to be a global citizen to really be able to live the kind of life that you want to live, to not be a victim to what a government here or a government there, whether it's a government in the first world or the third world, decide to do. And you really have to spread your money around so that you're safe and that your money's safe and that you can grow it. I mean, that's sensible, right?
Yeah, a lot of South Africans, we sit and we think that it's a negative thing here in South Africa.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you had all your money in American property in 2007, you would have looked like a class clown.
Right.
And, one of the best ways to get successful is to copy what other successful people do.
Uh-huh.
And, literally the top 1%, the billionaires out there, are diversified. They're diversified not just by country, but by asset class. And yet most of us are not doing what they're doing, and yet we want the same results.
Yeah, and most people have a dream that they'll have a house overseas one day. Sometimes that dream just never happens, and sometimes if you're lucky, it does. But it's more than being lucky. It's being educated about what there is out there. Certain places you don't want to buy property in. There's certain places you do, and that changes all the time.
Well, look, I mean, it's like any investment. Timing is everything.
Uh-huh.
So, there was fantastic time to invest in London. I personally wouldn't be investing in London right now. Taxes are changing, et cetera, et cetera. But my point being is that you've got to be able to, and I mean, it's one of the things that I tried to write in my book, because what a lot of people do is they get stuck to one place, one country. And at the end of the day, we used to be local and linear, and we're now global and exponential. And my point being is that just because I know Johannesburg doesn't mean I need to invest in Johannesburg for the rest of my life. And equally, if I've started investing in London, I just stick to London. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
You've got to be able to go around the world as market changes, as fundamentals change, and where there's opportunity, be able to find it.
The old way of thinking is you kind of get attached to a property, and that property remains a lifelong investment. You're saying you should be willing to make changes so that your money can grow.
Well, look, in simple terms, this morning I got in my Uber taxi and I switched on Cliff Central app and I listened to your radio all the way here.
That was impossible 2 years ago.
Well, think about how things have changed even in 2 years.
Right.
So when you think of that and then you put it into the investment space, think how efficient you are in terms of what you guys are doing and getting the message out there. Think how efficient Uber is. Why can we not have the same in technology, in investment? And my point being is that 15 years ago, I could only invest in Joburg because I only knew Joburg. And to be fair, the estate agents were the ones that had all the information. So they used to arbitrage the market. And I couldn't go to Cape Town even because how do I get started? But now with technology, I've got access to the right information and the right partners worldwide.
Do you have to be rich to even start doing this?
Well, you see, with where technology is going, it's dropping the barriers to entry more and more and more. So, when I started out, you needed R1 million plus to be able to invest overseas. We've now got it down to $10,000. And my dream is to get it down to $1 per person per investment.
How would that work?
Well, not too dissimilar to when I clicked on your app and literally started listening to you guys live this morning. It's exactly the same as Uber. You would go in, you would use technology, you would find quality investments around the world, and you would be able to invest through an online platform.
And in some cases, you'd be able to take even a little bit of money and aggregate that with other people's little bits of money to make a large investment?
So in simple terms, in South Africa, we know of the stokvel. And really, this is not too dissimilar to a
Sia
stock
runs
fell.
5 Stockfells.
Oh, well,
You didn't know that about him.
I'm chairperson of many a stock file.
Yeah.
well, really, in simple terms, it's worldwide. It's called crowdfunding.
Yes.
But in South Africa,
We've
it's
been doing it
you
for
know
years.
exactly. Well, centuries almost, and it's just Stockfile with technology. So yes, it's bringing like-minded people together to get involved in a quality opportunity. But there's something that's really important. It needs trust. It needs transparency. And most importantly, it needs the interest to be aligned.
Right, because a lot of people get nervous when you talk like this. They go, oh, this is a Bernie Madoff thing. Or this is one of those terrible pyramid schemes where people end up selling cosmetics door to door and they never make a cent. You know what I mean.
100%.
People get upset. And when you say crowdfunding, there's some instances where crowdfunding has been tremendously successful. And there's some where people have been burnt.
Look, don't get me wrong. Technology doesn't solve everything. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, investment still comes back to the fundamentals.
Yeah.
You still need to know what's happening in a country's economy, what's happening with their currency, which city to go into, which sector to go into, how to find the right partner, etc., etc., etc. Technology is just the enabler. When I caught that taxi this morning, I still went from A to B. Uber just made it more efficient.
I got you.
And my point is, you've got to go in with your eyes open. If you just think you're going to go on a platform and make investments, you're going to get burnt just as if you went to your financial planner and they didn't know what they were doing.
Now, let's say Mubs wants to get involved in property internationally. What is the first step that she has to take?
Look, the most important thing you've got to do to start off with is invest in yourself. At the end of the day, you've got to get the facts. And one of the things that always concerns me in South Africa is that when we're in times like the moment where it's a bit challenging and things are happening around the world, they tend to panic and they tend to make bad decisions because they react and they don't strategically think forward.
And they might take a whole lot of money that they've been saving that they know they're going to need one day, and they'll throw that at something, hoping it'll suddenly turn into something much
Yes,
more.
and the problem is you get a traveling salesman turning up at Santon Towers in a hotel room with a nice looking development in London as an example. It's 21 Rand to the pound. The salesman will tell them everything they want to hear. They do the deal, and buying a property is only 20% about the property and 80% about everything else. And people,
what do you mean by that? Explain that
you've got
someone.
tax,
Yeah.
you've got compliance, you've got structuring, you've got who's going to manage the asset because it's long distance, etc., etc., etc.
Okay.
My point being is that's why I say you've got to invest in yourself because you need to firstly understand why you're doing it. Most people fail in life because they get confused with the how and the what. You've got to understand why you're looking to invest offshore or even locally for that matter. And then once you understand the why, then you can work on the how and the what. And so to come back to Mubs in terms of if you were looking to get started, get as much information as you can. Think strategically. My uncle, I've got a great story of my uncle where half my family's from Zimbabwe. And my dad left Zim in 76, kind of reacted, came to South Africa. I was born in South Africa, but he didn't have a plan B. Like he literally he had to just deal with whatever
got out
life
of
hit him.
Zim, that was
exactly. My uncle didn't do that. At 1980, he was 30 years old. He started a plan B, started investing offshore. And in 2003, he decided he wanted to go to Australia. Now, it's irrelevant whether you want to go to Australia or not.
Yeah,
For me,
I
it
don't.
took 23 years worth of planning, though, to have the freedom to decide where he wanted to live, where he wanted to send his kid to school, university, etc., etc. And that's what we're passionate about. So to come back to what Mubs would do, you've got to get started. I always joke with people, and you might not think it, but this body's run 3 comrades. And
No, I had no idea. Look at you.
There's only one way to finish comrades. You've got to start. And that's exactly the same thing. A lot of people sit here and they'll go, or maybe this is only the sort of thing that Richard Branson can do, etc., etc. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, it's not. It's for everybody, but they've got to take the responsibility to invest in themselves to start off with.
Now, where did you get into this? How did this start for you?
Well, it's a long story, but in simple terms, it is the cliche of the rich dad, poor dad, but I've kind of just told you already a little bit about my dad,
your uncle and your dad,
etc. I decided that when in my teenage years that firstly I love building things. I did my first property project when I was 13 years old.
How?
I basically persuaded my folks that I didn't want to share with my brother anymore, and I drew designs of how we could knock through the toilet and create a double bedroom bathroom.
At 13?
Yeah.
Impressive.
And so basically real estate was what I was always going to do. I did construction management at Varsity, and there were 2 things that I wanted to do. One was I love property, and the other one is I love business. I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. And in simple terms, I did my dissertation in 1998 on how technology was going to revolutionize the property space. And so basically I've spent the last 17 years of my life trying to figure out how we can enhance this very old industry and create a lot more value. And for me, I want to keep coming back to the Uber thing because people understand it. Uber basically has increased the efficiency, reduced the costs, and most importantly, increased the accessibility. So again, you look at cars from 150 years ago. They were bespokely built. They were only for the uber wealthy, and they were like toys. And today, cars are available to everybody. And that was because of Henry Ford. And my attitude is that not only property locally, commercial property, and international property, why should we not all have access to the same opportunities as the top 1%? So coming back to your question, I've spent 17 years of my life in two spaces, understanding technology and real estate and how we can marry the two together.
That's pretty damn interesting. I mean, I think that a lot of people imagine that this is not something for them. You said it earlier. You said they think, oh, well, it's something for Branson. He has an island in the Caribbean.
I've been there.
Necker.
Yeah,
You've been there?
Spent a week with him in April, yeah.
Wow. What was that like?
Dude, that was one of the most phenomenal weeks of my entire life. It wasn't just him. There were about 15 other amazing entrepreneurs from around the world. And you talk about learning new mindsets. Actually, you realize as South Africans that we play too small.
Is that an attitude? Is that something anybody could do, or is it something that some people just have? Like you think big or you think small, and there's nothing that can train you out of that thinking if it's small.
They tend to say you become who you hang around with. And so I think it can be trained, but it's about the people you hang around with and the people you learn from. So if you're hanging around small-minded, negative people, you will consistently...
Don't point at Ben like that when you say that. It's a terrible thing to do, Scott.
No, so to answer your question, I definitely think it can be learned, and I definitely think that people can read books on it and ultimately grow that self-belief themselves. But as Tony Robbins says, it takes self-belief, then it takes action, then you get results, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Because if you've got limited self-belief, you could take very small action, you get weak results, and then you basically get worse self-belief, and it goes round and round, the wrong way. Whereas if in life you take massive action, as an example coming back to Mubs, invest in yourself, really understand what you're looking to do, then you're going to get great results. You're going to get more self-belief, and it's an upward cycle.
It's a nice cycle to be in, not the spiral that people get into when they start to doubt themselves. All right, but that's all good and well. Here's Nora Mack says, how can a young student get their bank to take them seriously with financing for a property? Let's say you haven't even got your own property here yet, let alone any kind of property overseas. That's the condition most people find themselves in. Property is very expensive. It is hard to get onto that ladder. For most people, this is a pipe dream.
Well, yes and no. So all the things that you've just said are the stories that people tell themselves. So at 19, we did our first property development down in Cape Town. We persuaded the landlord. He had a triple garage. We persuaded him to turn it into 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. At 22, we did our first development in Rondebosch. We basically bought the land. My point being is you've got to think out the box. So at 22, I had nothing. What I had was initiative and energy to find good opportunities. It's all about partnership. Most people think that they have to own 100% of something. I believe it's much better to own 20% of something than 100% of nothing.
So in other words, you've got to get into cooperatives with people who are like-minded and people who you believe have a good business brain, and take a stake in that and be willing to put up your money, little as it may be in the beginning,
or
in
your
the
time,
hope of it growing,
or your time, or your energy. One of the best ways to find good deals is to walk the streets. Dr. Dolph DeRoos talks about how to find a good deal, you've got to look at 100 properties, you've got to put an offer on 10, you've got to be accepted by 3 and only buy 1. That takes time.
Yeah.
Wealthy people don't have time, but they've got bank accounts or they've got access to credit.
So it's just utilizing the value that you do have.
100%.
Whether that's time or whether that's money or whether that's expertise.
And the point being is that, whether you're a student or not, it's irrelevant. Yeah. It's about having 2 things. Firstly, having the knowledge, because if you talk to someone and you know how to talk in their language, then they're going to accept you. It doesn't matter what that age group is. And the second thing is, again, having the self-belief to go out there and to create value. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you're creating value, people will respect that.
A lot of people would want to know, where are your properties? What kind of value have you built over the years?
So I started in South Africa, like I mentioned to you. I bought my first London property when I was 24 years old.
Jeez. And
we started in Australia in 2008, and we started in America in 2012. So I invested on 4 different continents. I started in residential properties, And I've been very privileged. I've met a gentleman called Henny Besadenhout, who's a mentor, chairman, and partner in my group, and he really got me into the commercial space. So we're now doing major commercial.
You get better returns in commercial property usually, right?
You do. I'll be honest with you, you get a lot less hassle as well. And I think also...
my geezer's broken and my cupboard's flooded. It's your fault. You're the landlord.
Yeah, and look, it's even worse a little bit here, and this is not a bashing South Africa session, but the point being is that unfortunately here the rules are in the favor of the tenants, whereas in the first world, like Australia and America, it's in the favor of the landlords. And in America, if someone doesn't pay my rent, they're out within 3 weeks. So
here you have to get the red ants in.
What kind of guidelines should I use when searching for places to invest in? Because say I like the sound of Abbottabad in Afghanistan, that doesn't necessarily mean that would be a good investment, right?
Definitely not. Who told you that?
What kind of guidelines should one use when looking for places to invest in?
Not listen to that person who told you to buy in Abbottabad.
Mubs, I think it's a great question, and it's actually why I wrote this book. And most people around South Africa have heard of Clem Santa.
The book, by the way, is called Property Going Global, How to Create Global Wealth and Invest with Confidence. It is Scott Picken's book. And Clem Santa, who I think everybody regards very highly, wrote the foreword.
Yeah, I think, from Clem Santa's perspective, he's got this whole scenario planning. So, no matter where it is in the world, you've got to look economically what's happening in the regions. I created a 4-dimensional model that I placed on top of his scenario planning model. And he was so impressed by it that he said to me I had to write a book and he would endorse it, which I didn't want to become an author. But anyway, we did. And the reason I did was we've got a system to help you go through to decide which economic region, which country, which city, which sector, right down to how to find the right partner. So, I come back to what I said to you earlier in terms of invest in yourself. What you can't do is get caught out and see high returns, because generally when stuff sounds too good to be true, it really is. In fact, I saw one just yesterday. And unfortunately, where the experience comes in is that it might look good, but long term, you're not going to get the results you're looking for.
There are places, though, that you should just not invest because of those scenario plans. Countries that you just see are not great places for returns on anything.
Well, I feel very strongly that...
Like Mub says, Afghanistan is probably a bad place to go.
Well, we live in the emerging market, and I feel very strongly that, there's really good opportunities here in South Africa. It is risky, but we know this place. We can manage that risk.
Listen, people need houses.
Well, exactly.
There are a lot of people who are starting to enter the middle class who were not there before. It's a growing, burgeoning place. Of course, economically at the moment, it's a tough climate as well. But ultimately, these people are going to want to improve their lives.
You're 100% right. But my point is, we know this emerging market. Why jump out of this pot into the fire in Afghanistan, as an example? So my attitude is, if you want to thrive in the emerging market, stay local, because you know what you can manage the risks. You know the market much better. If you're looking to diversify, you want to go into first world markets where you can have wealth preservation. Wealth creation happens in emerging markets. Wealth preservation happens in first world markets.
Now, there's an event happening. You want to tell us about that, because people can come along and get the info that they need?
Yeah, look,
some pretty important speakers there, right?
Yeah, in simple terms, Gareth, for me, again, I get very frustrated. 80% of South Africans that invest overseas actually lose money. They get caught up. That's stats that came out over the last decade. And again, it's everything I said. It's fear, it's reaction, it's everything else. So we've been helping people and educating people for over a decade ourselves. And we decided, let's put an event together. It's called the Wealth Movement. And the idea was not to have a bunch of keynotes that are going to talk slick stuff and run to the back of the room and buy it. We've got the best in South Africa, literally the billionaires of South Africa and the best globally, to come together to debate, to discuss what are their lessons they learned, what are the mistakes they made, why do they invest in certain countries, what asset classes do they invest in, and why. The first day is all about the why, so that people can fully understand. We've also got some of the best technologists involved, and you guys are involved because you're leading edge in terms of technology side, so that people can understand what are the trends happening around the world from a technology point of view that can enable us. And then day 2 is the how and the what. So if I want to invest in Australia, I can then go to a 40-minute presentation on literally what is happening in Australia, how can I immigrate to Australia if I want to buy, and should I buy something in Brisbane or Melbourne. So my point being is that...
Because otherwise people have to figure it all out themselves, and sometimes they get bad advice.
And that's the point. So for me, it's about investing in yourself for 2 days.
Yeah.
You've got everyone, whether you're interested in the UK, Cyprus, Malta, Mauritius, America, Australia.
Mabale is very interested in Mauritius, for example.
Well, but that's the point. We're bringing all these trusted partners together. If you want to know
Sri Lanka is
very much, yeah.
But I think Gareth, the most important thing is it's that one-stop shop. How do you move your money offshore legally? What tax structures do you set it up in? How do you manage the property, etc., 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 all in one place versus trying to kind of find the stuff on Google.
All right, so where do we find out about the Wealth Movement, and how do we book a ticket and all the logistical nonsense that people forget about?
So the website is wealthmovement.co.za. Very, very easy. The website's there. They can book tickets.
Okay.
And basically it's available to all in South Africa. Our whole intention is to empower South Africans, and we want them to be able to co-create the best future.
You're not going to go there and become part of some scheme. You're just going to go there for information.
This is all about learning.
Right.
So at the end of the day, you're not signing up to anything. You're not part of some cult or
no, because you hear about these things. That even churches that rip people off and they take their money, and people are nervous, especially in times like these where fear, as you said earlier, plays such an important role. Rather empower yourself by figuring out what really is happening.
Exactly.
Go along and learn.
Come listen and learn. And I think also take a look at the caliber of speakers. Roger Hamilton's one of the most respected people globally. Joy Scoffler is one of the most respected people in America. Paul Niederhauser is one of the most respected people in Australia. Mm-hmm. We've literally got the best globally coming together. And then we've got, great people like yourself and great South African icons that are also coming together. It's not just an overseas event. This is what is the best in South Africa and what are they doing so that I have the ability to learn from them and to be able to copy their successes.
So trust me, I'm not going to talk about property. I don't know the first thing, but I'll talk about what we're doing. That's something I can talk about.
Well, you see,
little. My CV when it comes to property is limited.
Yeah, but look, I think the most
flat in a butterbud, and that's about it.
Well, interesting enough, depends which property space you're talking, because you certainly own the social space. Yeah. But no, I think but for me the beauty is it's marrying the two together.
Paying rent there, by the way. I'm thinking you're throwing out the tenants.
Fair enough. But I think Gareth, the most exciting thing is exactly the way you guys are doing it. Is what is technology doing to enable people? And we've all come from this place of scarcity and. The lady that asked you the question, that's a student. There's no more scarcity. You all you've got to do is get the answers to create the life you want, and come and learn from the people that have done it before.
Before we let you go, here's Marlon says, ask your guest if he would consider the TREOC, TREOC method. I don't know what that is. It's founded by Kurt Coetzee as an appropriate starting point. I don't know what Marlon's talking about. Do you?
I know exactly what it is.
Okay, tell me. What is it? Why do you laugh?
Public live radio.
Yeah, come on.
No, I don't believe in it. So basically for me,
what is this TREOC method?
So
let's start with that.
TREOC is a method where Kurt Coetzee teaches people about how to invest in property, and they've got a double trust structure that effectively was a way to hoodwink the banks to be able to borrow more properties, because your whole credit rating and how much money you're allowed to have. If you put money from one trust into another, the banks were a bit confused as to how much you actually earned. I met a young guy in London years ago. He'd bought 20 million rands worth of property at the age of 23, but he had no income. But that sounds really exciting until I actually asked him, how many have transferred? They were all off-plan developments. None of them were cash flow positive. And I was like, dude, I guarantee you're going to go bankrupt. Like, I guarantee it. And needless to say, him and
Shame, to the tune of 20-odd million. That's not nice.
Unfortunately, to come back to the question, go to all of them, learn from everyone, but be very careful, because property is common sense. Okay, and if you try to do fancy, sophisticated structures, just be careful who's actually making the money in all these processes. And
it's
more
probably the person who designs the process, I'd imagine.
Pretty much you hit the nail on the head. But the most important thing is it's common sense. Use the knowledge you've got, your common sense. Look for properties that are good quality properties that you would like to buy or live in, and look at income. And the thing is, it's about simplicity. The more complicated people make it, in my opinion, what I've learned in life, the more complicated people make it, they're either trying to get fees out of you don't know what's going on, or they don't fully understand the process. Keep it simple, and that's when people, don't lose money.
Thank you. If you want to find out more, go to wealthmovement.co.za. That's right, where you can get all the information about who will be speaking, about what you could go and learn there, about what kinds of information is available. And when is it happening?
8th and 9th of October here in Bryanston, Johannesburg.
So you've got about a month to get ready for that.
That's exactly. And Gareth, I just wanted to finish off for South Africans. I truly believe we've been given one of the greatest privileges on the planet, being born here and getting to live here. Because we live in the emerging market, and the 21st century is all about the emerging market.
Unless you're born in Port Elizabeth.
Well, fair enough. But my point being is that we need to celebrate being South African, but we also need to understand how we can have that global outlook so that we can choose to live in South Africa, not have to live in South Africa. And for me, it's all about empowering.
What's Knysna like?
Awesome, dude.
It's great, huh? You like
Teeson
living
Island. Yeah, no, man.
Teeson Island. There's a lot of very rich people who live there.
Well, while most people are sitting in their traffic at 5 o'clock in the evening, my son and I and wife are on the boat, going to the heads. So.
That's nice.
You need to read the 4-Hour Work Week, which is all about how most people work their whole life to retire to the beach. And I just figured, well, why not just go live at the beach?
Excellent move.
Exactly, because when you retire, you haven't got a beach body.
Well, exactly. Dude, I don't quite have a beach body now, but anyway.
Yeah, but you still got energy. When you're old and frail, ugh.
Yeah, look, there's a lot to be learned. But most of us just keep on going the way the wheel turns, and we don't realize that we can hop off and we can do our own thing.
Well, I mean, look at you guys. I mean, think out the box and you take your life to another level.
Listen, this is my grindstone. What are you talking about? it's a huge burden around my neck. What are you talking about? Living a happy life. Anyway, thank you, Scott. Very, very good to have you on. And we'll find out more by going to wealthmovement.co.za, book your tickets, and who knows, you might just learn something about how to invest internationally in property and also how to get yourself out of that rat race that most of us feel.
Mindset trap is what I would call it.
There we are. Absolutely.
Guys, thanks very much. And Gareth, thanks for your time, and to the team as well.
Not a problem at all. Thank you. Scott Picken. It is just after 8 o'clock. In a moment, we're going to meet the guys from a brand new show. It's called Burn the Floor. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, he's written a little message in my book here. Do you want to hear it, Mubs?
Yep.
Let's create global wealth together and have lots of fun empowering people. Thanks, Scott. Isn't that nice? Thank you, dude. Look forward to seeing you again.